Hi, my name is Amelia Hart. I'm a 42-year-old teacher and a single mom to two wonderful kids. Life has always been busy for me, but what happened to me recently? Well, it changed everything. It's an experience I can't forget, and I feel like I have to share it because it gave me a new perspective on life, faith, and the world around us. Let me take you back to that night. It was a regular evening in October 2023. Nothing about it seemed out of the ordinary. I had just come home from work, tired as usual. My two kids, Ethan and Lily, were at the table doing their homework. Ethan's 10 and Lily's 8. And honestly, they're my whole world. That night, I made dinner like I always do. Nothing fancy, just some pasta and salad. The kids were telling me about their day, laughing about something that happened at recess, and for a moment I felt this little flicker of happiness, but it was brief because deep down I was so overwhelmed. I had been feeling like this for weeks, maybe months. Life felt like a treadmill I couldn't get off. After dinner, I helped Ethan with a math problem he was stuck on, and Lily asked me to review her spelling words. I sat there, pretending to be patient, but honestly, my mind was somewhere else. I kept thinking about all the things piling up at work, the bills waiting on my kitchen counter, and how I hadn't had a moment to myself in, I don't even know how long. I remember looking at the clock that night. It was around 8:30. The kids were finally winding down, and I thought to myself, this is my life, day in, day out, the same routine. I couldn't help but wonder if this was it for me. Was I just going to keep going through the motions until... what? I didn't know the answer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Looking back now, I realized that night wasn't ordinary at all. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about myself, my faith, and the life I was living. But at the time, I had no idea what was coming. So after dinner that evening, I got the kids to bed and headed out to a PTA meeting at their school. It was one of those nights where I didn't really feel like going. I was tired and all I wanted was to collapse on the couch. But I went anyway because, well, that's what you do as a mom. You show up, even when you're running on empty. The meeting dragged on longer than I expected. By the time I was heading home, it was almost 10 p.m. The roads were quiet, and a light rain had started to fall. I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt, the kind of peace you notice when the world slows down, even if just for a moment. The drive was mostly uneventful at first. The highway was empty, and I could hear the faint rumble of thunder far off in the distance. I had the heater on low, the soft hum of the car filling the silence. I think I even started to let my guard down a little, enjoying the quiet after such a long day. And then it happened, so fast that I barely had time to react. Out of nowhere, a deer leapt into the road. It was huge, and its eyes reflected the headlights as it froze in place. My heart jumped into my throat. Instinct took over, and I yanked the wheel hard to the right to avoid hitting it. The car swerved violently. I tried to regain control, but the tires lost grip on the wet road. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion, yet it was over in an instant. I remember the sickening sound of metal crunching as my car slammed into a tree. The windshield shattered, and for a moment, there was this deafening noise. Glass breaking, the steering wheel jolting in my hands, and then silence. The kind of silence that feels too heavy, like the world itself is holding its breath. I felt myself slipping away. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was terrifying. Later, the paramedics told me my heart had stopped for a few moments. At the time, I didn't know what was happening to me. All I knew was that everything went still, and I was no longer in the driver's seat, in more ways than one. What happened next is something I'll never forget. It's hard to explain, but I'll try to describe it the best I can. After the crash, I felt this strange sensation, like I was being pulled away from everything. It was almost as if I were floating upward, weightless. I wasn't aware of my body anymore. The pain, the tension, all of it was gone. I looked down and saw myself still slumped over in the car. It was the strangest thing. To see your own body like that, almost like it wasn't even mine. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. There was this odd sense of peace, as though I knew everything was exactly as it was meant to be. Then I noticed the light. It wasn't the headlights of another car or anything from the crash scene. It was soft but powerful, warm and golden, and it seemed to surround me completely. It wasn't just something I could see. It felt like I could feel it too. The light wasn't harsh or blinding. It was comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket on a cold night. Suddenly, I wasn't in the car anymore. I was standing in this vast, endless meadow. It was unlike anything I've ever seen on Earth. The grass beneath my feet was soft and seemed to glow faintly, as if it were alive. The sky above me was a swirl of colors, vivid purples, blues, and golds that seemed to stretch on forever. I couldn't even name some of the colors. They were beyond anything I've ever seen. It felt both familiar and completely new at the same time, like I had always belonged there, but was seeing it for the first time. I stood there, taking it all in, when I heard someone call my name. Amelia. The voice was gentle but commanding, like it came from everywhere at once. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it carried a weight that made me feel calm and safe. I turned toward the sound, and even though I couldn't see who was speaking, I knew I wasn't alone. In that moment, I realized something extraordinary was happening, something far beyond anything I could understand or explain. And as strange as it sounds, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to see what came next. I can still remember the exact moment when I first saw him. There was no warning, no sign that he was coming, but suddenly he was there. It was like he had always been a part of this place, this strange meadow, but I had never noticed him until now. He wasn't like anyone I'd ever seen before. He didn't have the features of a person. There were no distinct gender traits, no face to recognize, no clothing to identify him. What struck me the most was the light that surrounded him. It was radiant, almost blinding, but not in a way that hurt. It was the kind of light that felt both powerful and gentle, like the sun at dawn, warm and comforting, but full of strength. I couldn't quite see his face, not clearly, but I could feel his presence, like an immense calm radiating from him. He was both warm and strong, like he was holding the entire world in his hands, and yet offering me peace at the same time. His very presence made me feel small, yet safe, and I knew in an instant that he was someone important, someone meant to guide me. He spoke then, and when he did, his voice was deep but gentle, full of warmth that reached into my heart. He said, "You've been brought here to see what you've forgotten and what lies ahead." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. It was like I was hearing something that was both new and ancient at the same time. His words didn't scare me. They didn't fill me with dread, but instead, they filled me with a quiet curiosity. I didn't know what he meant, but I knew somehow that I was supposed to follow him. I felt drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain, like my soul was reaching for him, asking to understand. I took a step toward him, and as I did, the ground beneath me shifted. I wasn't walking on solid earth anymore. It was more like I was floating, gliding through the air, but I never felt unsteady. The path that appeared before me was glowing, softly lit by the same radiant light that surrounded the guide. It stretched out in front of me, winding through the meadow, and I felt an overwhelming urge to follow it. The guide didn't move much, but I felt his presence guiding me, like he was somehow leading me without needing to do anything more than stand there. I had so many questions, but I also knew that they would come in time. The path ahead seemed to go on forever, and yet I felt no fear, only awe. I was in the presence of something greater than anything I had ever imagined. There was an undeniable sense of purpose in the air, and even though I had no idea where this path would lead, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. The guide didn't tell me to hurry, didn't ask anything of me except to walk. And so I did. Step by step, I moved toward that glowing path, trusting that wherever it led, I would be ready to follow. The more I walked, the more I understood. There was something in the very air around me that whispered of forgotten truths, of things I had once known but had somehow let slip away. It was as though this journey was not just a physical one. It was a journey inside myself, and I was ready to see where it would take me. As I followed the guide down the glowing path, I had no idea what to expect next. I was filled with a strange mix of curiosity and awe, and I couldn't help but wonder what I was about to learn. The guide, still radiating that warm, powerful light, spoke again, his voice calm, yet filled with purpose. "You are about to witness a series of visions," he said. "They will show you truths that will open your eyes to the reality of your life, the lives of others, and the world around you." And so the first vision appeared before me. It wasn't like a dream. It was so vivid, so real. Suddenly, I was looking at a world that felt strangely distant. People were everywhere, going about their daily routines. Some were in offices, some were walking down busy streets, and some were just sitting in silence. The strange thing, though, was that even though they were surrounded by others, they seemed so disconnected, alone, in their own world. I saw people rushing to work, staring at their phones, having conversations that were more about passing time than real connection. They were busy, yes, but there was something missing. Their faces didn't hold joy or peace. They were filled with a quiet emptiness. It was as if they were going through the motions of life, but never truly living it. The guide's voice broke through the silence, saying softly, "Many people live like this, caught in the rush of life, but missing the deeper meaning of it all." I nodded silently, feeling a pang of recognition in my heart. I knew what it felt like to be caught in that cycle. Then the vision shifted, and this time I saw families coming together, parents hugging their children, couples sharing quiet moments of connection, and friends laughing together. It was simple, nothing extravagant, but it was powerful. There was love and care in every action, in every word. I saw how these small moments rippled outward, touching lives beyond what was visible. It was like a stone dropping into a pond. The waves spread farther than the eye could see. There was a beauty in these moments that was so much greater than I had ever imagined. "This," the guide said, "is the heart of true connection. Love and unity have a power that cannot be seen, but it is felt by all." As the vision faded, another one appeared. This time, I was looking at my own life, specific moments where I had touched the lives of others. I saw myself helping a friend in need, offering a kind word to a stranger, and even doing small things for my kids that I had forgotten about. In those moments, I hadn't known the impact of my actions, but now I could see how deeply they had affected others. I saw how my small sacrifices, the little acts of kindness, had created ripples of good in the world, ripples that I had never even noticed at the time. I had thought those things were insignificant, but in the grand scheme of life, they mattered more than I had ever realized. The guide's voice echoed in my mind. "Your life is a thread in a greater tapestry, and every action, every choice, contributes to the whole." The words sank deep into my soul. I had always felt like my life was just one small piece of a much larger puzzle, and this vision showed me that even the smallest moments of love, kindness, and connection mattered. They were all part of something bigger than I could ever fully understand. As the visions faded, I was left with a deep sense of peace and purpose. I knew now that my life was meaningful, not because of big accomplishments or grand gestures, but because of the everyday choices I made to love, care, and connect. And in the end, that was enough. After showing me the beauty of connection, love, and the impact we can have on others, the guide's presence shifted. The warm light that had surrounded us began to dim, and I could feel the change in the air, like something heavy was coming. The guide's voice became more serious, yet still filled with that same quiet authority. "You have seen what is possible when love and unity guide our lives," he said. "Now you must see what could happen if we lose our way." And just like that, the world around me changed. The peaceful meadow faded, replaced by a dark and chaotic vision. It was as if the sky had been torn open and a storm had swept through everything. The people I had seen before, the ones who were so disconnected, were now engulfed in their fear and greed. I saw nations divided by anger and distrust. People fought in the streets over resources, over beliefs, over power. Fear and greed ruled everything, and the indifference of so many made the suffering worse. There was no compassion, no understanding, just a relentless cycle of violence and self-interest. The vision shifted, and I saw natural disasters ravaging the planet, wildfires consuming entire forests, hurricanes tearing through cities, droughts leaving fields barren. The earth itself seemed to be crying out in pain. The destruction felt endless, and the people in the vision seemed powerless to stop it. But what struck me the most was the growing sense of despair in the air. It was like a thick fog weighing down on everyone. People had lost hope. They walked around with blank expressions, their eyes empty, unable to see any way out of the mess they had created. It was a world on the brink of collapse, and the worst part was that so many couldn't even see it coming. And then I noticed something else. A clock appeared in the distance, its hands moving steadily forward. The ticking sound was constant and unnerving. With every second that passed, the events I was seeing unfolded faster. Natural disasters happened in rapid succession. Conflicts broke out across the globe. People grew more distant from one another. It felt as though time was running out, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The guide's voice broke through the chaos. "This is only one path," he said, his tone both somber and filled with hope. "But it is not the only one. This path can be changed. It can be stopped. It will be changed through love, faith, and action." As his words sank in, I realized something important. The world didn't have to look like this. The future wasn't set in stone. It wasn't too late. People could still choose to act with kindness, to put love before fear, to have faith that change was possible. The guide's presence became lighter again, the warmth returning to the air. The power is in your hands, and in the hands of all who choose to act with love and purpose. The future is not decided yet, but it will be shaped by the choices you make now. I stood there for a moment, taking in the gravity of what I had just seen. The weight of that possible future was overwhelming, but the guide's words gave me hope. We could change the path we were on. It was up to us to take action. The choice was ours, and it had to begin with love. The guide's presence shifted again, this time with an unmistakable sense of finality. There was no longer the calm, peaceful warmth that had surrounded us before. Instead, I felt a gentle pressure, like the weight of a decision pressing down on me. It was as if the very air around me had changed, becoming more serious, more urgent. "You have seen the paths that lie ahead," the guide said, his voice steady but filled with a depth I couldn't ignore. "Now, the time has come for you to choose." I was still standing in the middle of the vast meadow, but everything felt different now. The colors, the light, the very space around me, it all seemed to be waiting, holding its breath, for me to make a decision. The guide continued, "You must decide whether to return to your life with the knowledge you have gained or to stay here in this peaceful realm. Your life has a purpose, and there is still much for you to do." At first, I didn't know how to respond. My heart longed for the peace and serenity of this place, the absence of all the struggles and challenges I had faced back in the real world. It felt so perfect here, so free from pain, so full of light and love. I could easily imagine staying, giving in to the calm that wrapped around me like a warm embrace. But as I stood there, looking at the guide, I realized something. I had my children back home. I had people I loved, and they loved me. I had responsibilities, yes, but I also had a purpose, a real, living purpose. The world I had seen earlier, the one filled with fear, greed, and despair, was still within my reach. It wasn't too late to change things, to make a difference. My heart swelled with love for my children. They were my reason, my driving force. I knew that if I stayed here, I would be at peace, but I would also be leaving behind everything that mattered to me. I would be leaving the opportunity to make a difference in their lives and in the world. The choice became clear. I wanted to return. I wanted to share what I had learned, to bring back hope, love, and faith into the world. I wanted to help others see that it wasn't too late to change, to act with kindness, and to make a real impact. "I choose to return," I said aloud, my voice steady but full of emotion. "I have children to care for, a world to help heal, and a purpose to fulfill." As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt a shift inside of me. It was as though I was being gently pulled, almost like being wrapped in a soft current. I felt myself being lifted, drawn back toward my body, back to the world I had left behind. The warmth of the meadow faded, and I could feel the weight of my own body again. The peaceful realm slipped away, and the familiar sights and sounds of the world slowly returned. I was back, but I was different. I could feel the knowledge I had gained in my soul, as though it had become a part of me. I opened my eyes and I was back in the car, the crash still fresh in my memory. I was alive. I had returned. But as I looked around, I knew that my life would never be the same. I had a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. My heart was full, not just with love for my children, but with a desire to share the light I had seen and to make a difference, no matter how small. I knew that I had a choice now, and I was determined to make it count. When I woke up, everything was blurry at first. The bright hospital lights above me made my eyes squint, and I could feel a dull pain in my body, but it was nothing compared to what I had felt before. My mind was foggy, and I couldn't quite piece together what had happened. Was it real? Was it a dream? Everything felt so vivid, so tangible. But here I was, in a hospital bed, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the soft murmur of voices. I turned my head slowly and saw the concerned faces of doctors and nurses standing nearby. One of them, a kind-looking woman, was holding my hand. "Amelia," she said gently, "you're awake. You've been through something incredibly serious, but you're going to be okay." The words didn't make sense at first. I had no memory of the crash, no recollection of what had happened right before I blacked out. The last thing I remembered was the sharp pain in my chest, the swerving of my car, and then nothing. But then they told me. They said I had stopped breathing, that for a brief moment my heart had stopped. I should have been gone, they said, and yet here I was, alive. They called it a miracle. I couldn't believe it. The doctors couldn't explain how I had survived the crash, especially with how severe it had been. But somehow, against all odds, I was here. I was breathing, I was alive, and I was given a second chance. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything. The experience, everything I had seen, everything I had felt, was still with me. It had changed me in ways I couldn't fully explain, but I knew it had opened my eyes to something bigger than myself. I had seen a future that could be full of despair, but I had also seen the beauty of love, of connection, of the small acts that make the world better. When I returned home, I found myself looking at my children with new eyes. I had always loved them, of course, but now I saw the importance of being truly present with them. Every moment with them felt like a precious gift. I focused on the little things, helping them with their homework, talking with them after school, just being there in the moment instead of rushing through life the way I had before. And it wasn't just my children. I began to focus on the relationships I had with my students too. I'm a teacher, and I always cared about my students, but now I understood how important it was to make every conversation meaningful. I took the time to listen to them, to encourage them, to help them see their worth. I couldn't keep the experience to myself. I had to share it. So I began telling my story to anyone who would listen. I shared it with friends, with family, with people who were struggling to find meaning in their own lives. I wanted them to know that there is always hope, always a chance for change. We don't have to be stuck in the rush of life, disconnected and lost. We can choose to live intentionally, to love, to connect, and to make the most of every moment. I don't have all the answers. I still don't know everything. But I do know this: we're not alone. We're all connected, even when it feels like we're not. And every moment matters. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every hug, it all matters. So, as I continue my life, I hold on to that truth. And I hope in sharing my story that it will inspire others to live with intention and love, just as I've learned to do. We may not know what tomorrow holds, but we do know that today is ours, and it's up to us to make it count. As I sit here reflecting on everything that has happened, there's one thing I know for sure: life is precious. We can often get caught up in the chaos of our daily routines, in the noise and demands of the world, and forget just how much power we have to shape our lives and the lives of others. But in the end, it all comes down to this simple truth: live with purpose, love deeply, and never underestimate the impact of your actions. Living with purpose means being present. It's about understanding what truly matters: our relationships, our connections, and the way we treat others. It's easy to get distracted, to focus on the things that don't bring us fulfillment. But when we live with purpose, we focus on what we can give, not just what we can get. Every moment becomes an opportunity to make a difference, to show love, to spread kindness. Loving deeply means opening our hearts, not just to those closest to us, but to the world around us. We all have the ability to make an impact, whether it's through a kind word, a helping hand, or simply taking the time to listen. Love is the thread that connects us all, and when we choose to love deeply, we create ripples of change that go far beyond what we can see. And never underestimate the impact of your actions. Every little thing you do has the potential to affect someone in ways you might never even realize. A smile, a gesture, a moment of encouragement, it all matters. We may not always see the immediate effects, but trust me, they are there. So take each day with intention, live with purpose, love with all your heart. And remember, your actions, no matter how small, have the power to change the world.